Are you struggling with your running form? And have you given much thought to how much faster you could be running if you had better form? Now imagine running further with less energy and really enjoying your runs. Today, we're diving into something that every new runner needs to consider, and that's running form. It's super important for efficiency and speed, so if you want to run better and feel better while doing it, stick around. I'll be sharing how I fixed my running form using the cues in this video, the last two being by far the most important to focus on when out on your next run, so don't miss them if you want to see instant results. But first, let's talk about the 3 most common issues with running form that most of us face. You may find it surprising, but improper foot strike is not one of these problems. It doesn't matter much whether you're a heel striker, a midfoot striker, or forefoot striker, and although most runners tend to gravitate towards a predominant foot strike, I believe that every runner strikes the ground with different parts of their feet every time they run, and this is because of changes in the terrain and gradient as well as the imperfections of the ground contact surfaces. Plus, there's nothing inherently right or wrong with any foot strike in particular, and we've seen elite runners with all sorts of foot strike. With that out of the way, the first issue that a lot of new runners face is having a tendency to overstride, which not only leads to a whole host of running related injuries, but it's inefficient and it slows you down. Plus, it can make running feel like a chore instead of the joy that it's meant to be. So what causes overstriding? Well, overstriding happens when your feet lands in front of your center of mass, and it's caused by you overreaching your foot forwards beyond your center of mass. This was a major problem for me when I started running, as I had a tendency to reach my foot forward as far as possible, thinking that it would help me run faster. When overstriding, it's quite natural to strike the ground with your heel, purely because your foot is way out in front. I said earlier that there's nothing inherently right or wrong with heel striking, but when you overstride and land on your heel, that initial split second when your heel hits the ground creates a momentary braking force, which slows you down. Next up is pelvic drop. This happens when one hip drops considerably lower than the other hip when running. Pelvic drop is primarily a result of weakness in the gluteus medius, and it causes your body to compensate by leaning towards the higher side with every stride, creating excessive side-to-side movement. It in turn causes your knees to move towards the center and rotate inwards. Like with overstriding, all these excessive movements slow you down and expends energy. The last issue is insufficient forward lean, which refers to how far your torso is leaning forward relative to its usual position, like when you're standing straight. Optimal running form functions best with a slight forward lean, somewhere between 8 to 10 degrees. Another thing that may surprise you is that I didn't mention low running cadence as an issue. Although increasing a running cadence can be beneficial, there is nothing magical about this at all. Many runners are on the 180 cadence per minute bandwagon, but there are in fact 4 factors that can influence cadence, namely terrain, individual biomechanics, runner's height, and speed. Running uphills, downhills, on roads or on trails all affect our cadence, and generally the taller the runner, the slower the cadence. But the biggest influence on cadence is speed. If we're out on an easy run, say at about 6 minutes per kilometer or 9:30 per mile, our cadence would likely be in the 160s per minute. Pick up the pace to say 4:30 per kilometer or 7 minutes per mile, and our cadence will invariably increase into the 170s per minute. Elite male marathoners run at a pace that is about 3 minutes per kilometer or sub 5 minutes per mile, so their cadence are usually upwards of 180 per minute. Again, there is no magic in trying to achieve 180. Now let's talk about how you can improve your running form. Well, we now know that we should not be overstriding, but instead landing with our feet under our center of mass. We also know that we should limit our pelvic drop and have a slight forward lean when we run. But how would you know if you're actually executing all this properly? Well, before we get into that, remember to hit the subscribe button so you can improve your running form immediately. In my running journey, I found that focusing on cues have been a lot more helpful than just knowing what the correct running form should be. So I'm going to share with you the same cues that I use to help me fix my running form. First things first, I want you to imagine a middle line in front of your body that extends out by about 12 to 18 inches, as well as up above you by the same 12 to 18 inches. We're going to use this as a target plane of reference for the cues coming up. The first cue will help you keep your head, neck, and body position in the correct plane, and it will help you achieve a forward lean when you run. If you run with your head and body swaying from side to side, it's going to waste a lot of energy as these movements do not propel you forward. Now imagine a string that runs from your tailbone all the way through your spine and neck and coming out off the top of your head. Then think of someone pulling that string towards the top of that imaginary middle line that's in front of your body. With the string pulling taut forward, your back, neck, and head will be in line. And since that imaginary pulling force on the string is from the top of your head, that will cause you to lead with your head and achieve a slight forward lean. If you're wondering why a forward lean is advantageous, well, a forward lean is how advanced runners use gravity to help propel them forwards. When leaning forward at the ankles to the point of almost falling face down, our natural reaction will be to step one foot forward to support ourselves. Repeat this over and over rapidly and we're running. So instead of using energy to push our bodies forwards, we're using gravity to make us fall forwards, and our legs are just catching our fall with every stride, moving us along. The next cue will help with your hand position and arm swing. If our arms are swaying from side to side and moving in all directions, they are at best making us less efficient, but more likely these excessive movements are a waste of energy. But what is the correct arm swing? Well, we basically want our fists to come up to about our lower chest and very close to the imaginary middle line in front of our body, but without passing over the line. Then down to the side of our hips with our fists held firm yet relaxed in the same plane as our forearms, not turning out or flopping with every stride. Essentially, the movement of our wrists together with our midsection would form some sort of a triangle when we look down at it. For this cue, imagine you're holding drumsticks with a French grip. If you've never played drums before, this is how you hold drumsticks with a French grip. Then picture a small imaginary drum positioned along the middle line, about 12 to 18 inches in front of your belly button. Your cue is to hit that imaginary drum with your imaginary drumsticks with every stride, but without bending your wrists. This is going to keep your arms swinging efficiently in the correct plane and driving you forward. Next up is one of the two most important cues. This cue will help you stop overstriding and reduce pelvic drop. In fact, it will also aid in helping you achieve a forward lean. That said, my suggestion is to work on this cue only after you've nailed your arm swing, as you need to use your arms as a point of reference. For this cue, focus on driving the front of your knees forward and up towards the middle line, with your knees as the leading point of your whole leg. The goal is that your legs are moving directly forwards without it flaring, as that's a waste of energy and it reduces your efficiency. To help with that, think of aiming each knee up towards the opposite wrist as they are approaching the highest position when swinging towards the middle line. In other words, drive your right knee forward and up towards your left wrist and vice versa. If you're worried about your knees driving past the middle line, well, don't. Naturally, your knees will not cross over that middle line, as it will feel really awkward to drive your knees past that point. Also, your knees will not reach as high as your wrists, so that's also not a concern. When driving forward with your knees, relax the muscles in the front of your lower legs and let them follow your knees, as if you're running over logs or low hurdles. Without tension in your lower legs during the forward knee drive, it is almost impossible to overstride. Your knees will be leading the way, and at the most outreach point, you will just let your feet down to strike the ground and toe off again. It would invariably cause you to lean forward, as all your reference points are about 12 to 18 inches in front of you. Plus, when driving your knees forward and up, there's a much lower chance that your pelvis will drop, as the weight of your legs are deloaded off the gluteus medius muscles. And the final important cue has to do with muscle engagement. We can all run by engaging different sets of muscles, all of which will move us forward. But which combination of muscle engagement is the most efficient? Let's take the arm swing for example. Are we driving it forwards and recovering on the backstroke? Or do we drive it on the backstroke and recover on the front stroke? Or do we drive it both back and front in a pumping motion? Since we're already on the topic of arm swing, let's start with that. What we want to do is drive it backwards. That is where we should be applying the force. And the front stroke is the recovery. We want to use as little energy as possible during the recovery phase and let our arms swing forward naturally. The only focus with the forward swing is to aim our arms towards the middle line in front of our chest. This goes hand in hand with the cue to hit the imaginary drum in front of us. When we're hitting the drum, we're essentially driving our arms backwards with force. But what about our lower bodies? Well, we talked earlier about driving the knees forward and up, and we want to engage only the muscles that help us do that. Focus only on the muscles that drive the knees forward and not the foot or the lower leg. The other group of muscles that we want to engage are the muscles that enable us to toe off after our feet strike the ground. This is the force that we put into the ground to drive us forward, and the focus here is on engaging our calf muscles and hamstrings. We want our calves and hamstrings to contract in a concentric movement, such that our feet are pushing the ground backwards and driving our heels up to look like we're running over logs. So basically, as one foot strikes the ground and toes off by causing a backward sweeping motion, the opposite knee is driving forwards by using the toe off as an opposite directional force. Well, that's all there is to it, but don't go out and try to focus on all these cues at the same time. That's not going to work. Do it one at a time. You can break your run up into segments, where in the first segment, you'll focus on one cue for a few minutes, and when you get to the next segment, add the next cue on top of the previous cue that you're already executing. Over time, you'll build muscle memory and you'll start to feel natural running with good form even without thinking of the cues. Let me know in the comments how these cues work out for you, and don't forget to hit the like button. Also, do consider subscribing as it costs you nothing, but it'll greatly help the visibility and growth of this channel. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.